It's one of the 7 deadly sins. But long before it can lead to one's demise, it can invoke something worse than death. And that is the lesson that Miles Phillipson learned back in the late 16th century. Back when I was still alive. This is the legendary story of
the Screaming Skulls of Calgarth Hall.
Miles Phillipson was born in 1540 to Elizabeth and Sir Christopher Phillipson of Westmoreland, England. At the age of 20, Miles married a rich co-heiress, Barbara Sandys. This marriage and Miles' inheritance of his father's estate in 1566 made Miles a wealthy landowner. In the years that followed, he was elected as the Chief Justice, making him both rich and powerful. Over time, Miles became filled with greed. He was no longer content with all he had and developed an obsession to have much, much more. Ultimately, Miles Phillipson grew fixated with wanting to acquire a beautiful stretch of land at the northeast end of Windermere Lake called Calgarth. Calgarth and its existing modest cottage were owned by a humble couple named Dorothy and Crasta Cook. Miles had made numerous offers to the Cooks for their property, but Dorothy and Crasta had refused to sell Calgarth at any price. Angrily, Miles Phillipson had tried to bully the couple into selling him Calgarth, using threats and harassment. Dorothy and Crasta stayed strong, though, and Miles eventually ceased his efforts, appearing to have accepted defeat. The Cooks felt they would be finally left alone on the matter, but they were wrong. As Christmas time approached, Miles sent Dorothy and Crasta an invitation to dine with him and his family on Christmas Eve. The Cooks gladly accepted. At that supper, Miles apologized convincingly, explaining how ashamed he was for how he had behaved. Little did the Cooks, or even Miles' own family, know, but this was all just a carefully planned ruse. While they were all busy eating, Miles' servant hid a silver goblet in Dorothy and Crasta's traveling bag, which they were unknowingly brought home with them. The next morning, to the Cook's horror, Miles Phillipson showed up at their cottage with the sheriff. Miles accused them of the theft, and after the sheriff performed a brief search, discovering the goblet in the Cook's bag, Dorothy and Crasta were immediately arrested and imprisoned. As Chief Justice, Miles Phillipson personally presided over the Cooks' trial, finding them both guilty and sentencing them to be hanged. Before the fateful day of the Cooks' execution, Miles had used his own authority as Chief Justice to transfer lawful ownership of Calgarth from the Cooks to himself. And just before swinging from the gallows, Dorothy Cook cursed Miles, saying that he would never be prosperous again, nor would his offspring. She vowed that she and Crasta would haunt Miles day and night. The bodies of the Cooks were buried in unmarked graves following their executions. Miles Phillipson had the cook's cottage demolished and had an elaborate manor house built in its place, which Miles had dubbed Calgarth Hall. The Phillipson family moved in soon as it was finished. The problems began on their first night in their new home. All throughout the night, their sleep was disrupted by continuous shrieks and wailing that echoed through the entire manor. Finally, before dawn, the source of the ghastly screams was located. A pair of human skulls sitting up on a shelf next to the rear stairway. Miles had his servants immediately remove the skulls from their home and threw them in a lake. But somehow, however, by sunup, the skulls were back on the shelf as if they had not been disturbed. Countless attempts were made to be rid of the skulls, as well as the countless methods. They were crushed, burned, thrown in Windermere Lake, and even buried. Yet the skulls always returned to the same place, on the same shelf. And Miles and his family were tormented each night by their horrifying screams. But the skulls were just the start of Dorothy Cook's curse at work. Miles' wealth had begun to swiftly diminish, and he was ultimately reduced to poverty. Only 2 of Miles Phillipson's 11 children survived their childhood. In the year 1600, Miles lost his beloved wife, Barbara, and their unborn son during childbirth. The rest of Miles Phillipson's life continued in impoverished misery and solitude, without a single night's peace from the ever-present shrieking skulls. Miles Phillipson died in 1649 at the age of 109. As soon as Miles Phillipson was dead, the skulls fell silent at long last. The next owner of Calgarth Hall successfully walled up both skulls somewhere inside that manor house, where they remain to this very day.
Alright, just like we practiced. Scream. Come on, scream. Just like we rehearsed. Come on, come on. Scream. I don't know. Maybe I should have cursed somebody before I died. Or maybe had a skull that was less plastic. Well, this is Lady Blanche with Legends and Lore, and we'll see you next time.